The age-old question, metal or rubber, valve stems. Let's get into it. What's going on? I'm Scott from Koenig. Before we get into this video, if you wouldn't mind clicking that subscribe button, that's cool. And also, don't forget, we have these hats available. Store.koenigwheels.com, you can get one right now. So there's no doubt that when you have mounted up your wheels and tires that you had to select the valve. Now, you might have been fortunate enough and then you never thought about it, but when you went to the wheel and tire store or you went to the wheel and tire professional to have your wheels mounted, they just put in one of these rubber valves. And there is nothing wrong with that. But today we're going to be talking about the difference between metal and rubber valves. What's the difference? Why should you use one over the other? So let's get into it. So when we get going here, I'm not going to explain to you what a valve does. Most likely you know that when you put air into this little thing and go shh, it fills up your tire. But there are some significant differences between the valves. Now, should you use one over the other? They both function the same way. Is this really an interesting topic?
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
These are all questions you're going to figure out for yourself, but we are going to tell you kind of what the differences are. All right, so let's get into it. Metal, rubber. Rubber valve stem seal is usually a standard size, especially for most aftermarket wheels, so you're not really going to have to go looking for the valve size. A standard rubber pull-through valve, pretty simple. It kind of works like a grommet section, right? There's a hole in the wheel, and when it gets pulled through, it essentially seals by the seat of this stem. But what you should know about these is that they are different from a metal. The rubber tend to have a little bit more forgiveness, a little bit more flex. This is going to be important for people that go off-road or potentially could have contact with the valve. You might be thinking, well, how's it going to happen to me on the street? Well, there are a few situations where it could happen, like taking on road debris, rocks, or anything like that. But for the most part, you're not the person we're talking to. When we start talking about wheel-to-wheel racing, when we start talking about different forms of motorsport, and again, the off-road enthusiasts, they definitely are going to have contact that's going to happen to these valves at some point in their life cycle. So that's why we need to consider about which one you would use in which situation. So when we start talking about the difference between rubber and metal valve stem seals, one thing you need to understand is that if you're going to be using this on the street, if you're going to be using this in just regular applications, you're not going to have to really worry about what valve you use. And I would recommend that you always use a rubber pull-through valve. One, they're super sourceable. You don't have to go anywhere special to obtain one. Two, for the most part, since they seal on their own, there's no changeable seals here, these don't really ever leak. And when they do, they leak out of the valve stem right here. And this is changeable, and you can totally do this on your own with a special tool, which is kind of like a little screwdriver, little cut bit, or a wheel and tire professional can do this for you in 2 seconds. And the best part is you don't have to change the stem. Metal valve. This is where it starts to get a little bit different, right? First thing is we should reference that this metal valve is aluminum. 99% of the valves you're going to find out there, again, going to be aluminum. And you have an aluminum seal cap here, a tightening nut that's going to be on the edge here, and you will have the rubber seal that will seal the back bead of the wheel to the valve stem. These are set up like most of the TPMS sensors that you're going to find in your OE wheels. And if you've looked, if you have a sensor in your wheel, most of the time, 90% of the time, you're going to use a sensor that actually seals in this same fashion. There's going to be a rubber seal on the back, a rubber seal on the front, a washer, and a lock nut that you see here. Now, these don't get tightened down with any real sort of torque. They're really kind of just done to make sure the seal is squished enough to seat and seal properly. So why are these sometimes problematic? This is a good question. This is really where we get down to the good stuff of why you should run a rubber valve versus a metal valve. So those seals tend to leak over time. They do. And when that happens, the only way to really get them out and change those seals, air down, break the bead of the tire, and replace the seals. So this is another serviceable part you're now introducing into your wheel and tire section. Listen, here's the thing. When you introduce serviceable items, you know that they have to be serviced. They have life intervals, and they're going to cause a problem at some point. The rubber pull-through valve doesn't really have that, so you don't have to really worry about what service life this has. In fact, I can think of wheels that I've had for many, many years, and I've never once had a problem with any of the valves. Metal valves are not necessarily that way. In fact, every time you're going to break the bead of your tire, or if you're going to do anything like changing the sensor or anything like that, you have to change these seals too. It's a serviceable item that you're now introducing to your wheel and tire package. Let's talk about some of the pros in using a metal valve and why would anybody actually use one. You'll tend to find the guys using them in motorsports or using them because they believe that they're more durable. Now, I think in a lot of different ways they are. They're metal, they're going to have some more strength and rigidity to them, but remember, they're going to be more susceptible to cracking or shattering or breaking, providing you have some sort of hard impact into them, where the rubber will actually have a little bit of a give. The next piece that people usually use a metal over rubber pull-through valve has to do with pressures. A lot of times there are really good valves out there that can hold some more pressure, but in most of the cases you're not going to need it because this rubber valve here, it holds plenty of pressure. That's not really going to be a failure point. Is there a major difference on some of the rubber? Not really. I mean, I would personally say this is going to be the one that's going to probably have the most amount of reliability. Rubber doesn't really have any changeable seals. Again, nothing here that's really going to break. Could they get cut? Could they get damaged? Absolutely. But let's look at the obvious. You're an enthusiast. You didn't come here to be lectured on what's best. Sometimes you just want to run what's cool. These metal valves, they're cool. These metal valves are cool, and they're good looking, and they really do add that race element to a lot of it. So I don't fault you for running one of these, and as long as you do it and just are conscious in the things that possibly can go wrong, if you wake up and you have a flat tire, check the valve first. You may be surprised to find out that you have a leak coming from the seal, and there's a soapy water thing you can do. Just spray some soapy water onto the stem, and if you see bubbles, you'll know that there's a leak. What if you have TPMS and you are determined to run a metal valve? They do sell 2 different types of adapters that you can put into the barrel of the wheel that actually allow your sensor to sit into the drop center of the wheel under the tire, so it still can operate the TPMS system. So let's talk about one popular failure point with metal valve stems, and that is the cap. I know, but here's the thing, and you should understand this. Whenever you put on a metal valve and you're going to be using the aluminum cap that came with it, you want to put a little touch of anti-seize on the threads here. And the reason is because there have been plenty of issues with corrosion buildup, especially if you don't change your tire pressure quite a bit or constantly have this valve off, where this aluminum will corrode to that aluminum. And when that happens, you can't get these off. And when you can't get them off, this valve is pretty much done. So make sure that you're not going to put yourself in a position where you can't air up because the cap is stuck on. Little anti-seize goes a long way. So which is it? Which one should we recommend? Is it the rubber pull-through? Is it the metal valve? Again, if you're using a TPMS sensor, if you're going to be keeping that TPMS compatibility that your car came with from the factory and you use a sensor in your wheel, you're not going to use either one of these, so that's off the table. But if you're going to have to make a choice, if you're a race guy, if you're not going to be using TPMS sensors or the TPMS compatibility, I would say if you can get away with it, run with the rubber valve stem. It's going to give you the most amount of give and flex and protection, even if it's made contact with something else kind of while you're driving. The metal seals are cool. The metal valves are really good looking, so I don't blame you if you try to go this route, but just understand what comes along with it, and if you do experience a leak, try to diagnose the valve real quick first. It takes 2 seconds with a spray bottle. Down. And you will not be searching around for something that may not exist. So that's really it. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you in the next one.